I write this in 21st Century Japan Decoded, whenever you see a Western person, and especially one who's speaking English, whenever Japanese interface with you, their Japanese complex kicks in. Because why? Because of what happened in World War II, the traumatic defeat that they took. So when you speak English to them, you automatically are taking the higher like seat, whether you want to or not. This is the way that they take it. And therefore you'll see how they try to speak English to you because of a mechanism that's been put in them, because they have to keep the invader out. Oh. They don't do that to Chinese people. They don't do that to Brazil. They don't ni hao. They don't do that to them.
Chapter 10 on page 58.
Okay.
This quote is mainly what you're just saying, I believe. It says, for Japanese, being a member of the group is what gives a person his power. And the group dynamic is an energy field created by the people.
Yes, so it's the difference between life and death. It's the difference between life and death, literally.
Literally.
I know people who know each other for 20 years, and they don't call each other friends. You know, because a friendship to them is, we had to meet when we were children. We had to grow up together. You know, I mean, it's so strict.
You said, well, the majority of the people are either Buddhist or, and that's not Hindu, Buddhist,
Confucian.
And yeah, you talk to Japanese people, and I meet all walks of life. And I've had students from Tokyo University, graduates who are college professors, factory workers, engineers, lawyers, judges, teachers, you know, high school kids, elementary, all the way down, all the way through elderly people. Most people will say Buddhist to some degree, even if they don't really follow or adhere that closely. But no matter what they say, Christian, Buddhist, it's very difficult. To me, they're different. They're distinctions without a difference, because the actual religion is the Yamato code.
Yeah.
You know? So it was like, you wear a red shirt and I'm wearing a green shirt. You know what I'm saying? You know, we both wearing shirts. And yeah, that's really what it is. Because that's first. They cannot turn their backs on it. To turn their, like, even to the point where if a Japanese person lives outside of Japan and they're not linked in with a group in Japan, Japanese don't see them as Japanese anymore. They might not tell you that, right? But because being Japanese is having allegiance and you know, respect for and being respected by a respected group in Japan. Like, there's no exceptions to that. So if you can come to Japan tomorrow with the cure to cancer, literally, and listen, man, you could prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. When you go to the medical doctor, the medical field, and say, hey, look, I got this great idea, this great cure, and they can look at it and see it. It's actually true. But what they're going to do is now look at you and say, who are you? Who are you? Like, who has validated you? So in other words, no matter what you have, I can't accept that. Because why? Because I'm going to have to account for you. It was the same concept I said about having a friend, or saying this is my friend, or vouching for this person. Right? So no matter what you have, when you come, no, you have to be vetted by the group first. Once you've been vetted and people say, okay, yeah, now this person is an established member of the group, now you start having the ability to speak and be heard. But you can't just come from nowhere and start talking.
So have you been able to adapt to the one way, as you put in your book, to be part of that culture? Or are you being accepted as Japanese?
Okay, well, to be accepted as Japanese is kind of a loaded question.
Okay.
for myself, being that I am Japanese and we started here, like when I came back to Japan, I noticed things right away that other people weren't noticing because it was bred into me to a certain degree. I talk about many foreigners, especially European people, will say you could never be accepted to be Japanese, and that's true, and it's not true. Because again, many of those people, they're talking about entitlement from my experience. For Japanese, it's just like, again, the military. You say, I want to be accepted. Okay, do you want to go through basic training? Do you want that drill sergeant yelling at you with his finger in your face? Do you want to do these push-ups? Okay, well then you don't want to be in the army, then stop talking about it. If you want to be Japanese, what do you think? You're going to start at the top? You don't come and start as a sergeant, you start as a private, and you have to prove your allegiance. And to do that, they're going to they're going to break you. So do you want that? But in most cases, you're coming from America, you're coming from a rich culture. Do you want to give that culture away and just to be Japanese? If you do, I think that that's not a healthy situation. And I don't think that you should I don't seek to do that. I did for a while, and that's when I ended up getting hurt, and because I became too extreme. It's a long story, but again, I told you I couldn't walk for a number of years. Yeah. And during that time, like many people, when you hit rock bottom, then and only then do you really figure things out, because now your life is on the line, right? You become a genius all of a sudden. And I realized it's not about being accepted or being liked. It's about being respected and being able to express power. Okay. When I say power, I don't mean to beat anybody up, but I mean, again, to be able to own your space. And I found by understanding the Yamato code and being able to respect it and go by the tenets, it doesn't matter what people, they all day, we don't really think he's not Japanese, but they have to treat me a certain way or risk being ostracized themselves. If you look in the book, I directly compare Japanese society with the US military. And I did it because to me, it's an easy match. And because these are two things that I'm very, very expert in. Like I say, my father, I'm a military brat. And I also served 3 years in the US Army myself. And then Japanese society, I instantly saw, I was like, oh, Japanese society functions just like the army or just like the military. Everybody has a rank, everybody wears a uniform, and there's a rank and file, everybody understands. And so when you're a foreigner in Japan, it's kind of like being a civilian on a military installation. Yeah, you can walk around with everyone, but everybody knows you're not really you're not on the inside. You're not on the code. You haven't taken the oath. You mentioned a number, like you said, 24 people a day?
22 persons a day, yeah.
Well, in Japan, I write in the book, at its height, I think in 2003, there were upward of maybe 20, I have the numbers in the book, over 25,000 people committed suicide. And it was, I think, an average of 108 people a day. And every year, any year that's under, it was 25,000, I think it's 20,000 now. Any year that's under 20,000 people, 20,000 deaths by suicide is considered a good year. So when we talk about suicide, other than South Korea, to my knowledge, Japan is experts. And then you have to imagine, these are the six. And when I went into the army because my father kicked me out the house, literally. And, I was going to run the streets or I'm going to go in here. So I went in the army, but I had bad attitude. I'm playing games. And once I realized, hey, I'm locked in here, depression came on me because I didn't like my surroundings. I didn't like anything about the food. I didn't like anything about the uniform. I didn't want to be here. And and especially when you're that young, if you don't have a stable foundation, like basic family, religion, these kinds of things, not even religion, but a spiritual system, something that guides you, something that enables you to stand strong on your square, the winds are going to just move you all around and blow you all around. And that's what you see in these places, young people, especially in the military, or people in Japan, who are just bogged down by responsibilities and their position. They can only see this, this far in front of them either way, or because they're just so busy, they always have their head down, and they really cannot see a way out of this. And to the point, I mean, suicide is the same anywhere. When you get to the point where you're like, you know what? I think taking my own life is the best decision. So think about how far you have to go before you get to that point. Because even when you start thinking maybe it is, it still takes a minute or two before you actually develop the nerve to really hit rock bottom and follow through with this. This is like torment on its highest level, at the highest level,
Like a really hopeless situation.
No, not like.
No,
not
it's
like.
in your mind, it's the hopeless situation, and you just feel that anything better is ever going to occur.
Right. It's always downhill. There's nothing yet.
Yeah.
And I mean, but even beyond that, this is the best route. And a lot of times, what do people say? They say they did it to relieve other people somehow, right? I don't want to be taken care of, maybe they're, they can't take care of themselves or something, I want to relieve such and such of their responsibility, let them live their life. Just like you, one day you made a decision to get married or a decision to go to a certain university, and that was your best decision. This is where they are. I think the best decision is for me to go get some pills, for me to do something to myself. I mean, that's torment.
Yeah.
And you had a quote that says, I just want the opportunity to master the art of self-expression. And if I can achieve this lofty goal and connect with like-minded souls, we can together ride the crest of humanity to the next level. That, my friend, is the only thing there is to do. And sometimes we here in America, let's speak about Joy again, can't speak. If we always hear and we speak our mind, we don't know what it is to live in a society where you cannot express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we take that privilege for granted. But that is a principle of life that God offers, the higher power offers us to expand our minds and go outside of our community to a greater community, and to hear such things as the Yamuto, and the Wa. And you're right, because with the Japanese, I do know that once they get in their mind, it's just like it's understood. They walk as one all the time. They are one. Mm-hmm. They are one. And and it's like under no circumstances do they violate that code,
Exactly.
So,
and if they do, there are severe repercussions that as an outsider, you could actually be there when they're enacting this punishment and you won't even notice it. But most so-called foreigners, when I talk to them about this, because they think, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I say, okay, have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen someone get given the riot act? And they're like, no. I'm like, yeah, because when you're around, they're performing. You're not seeing, they're not comfortable enough with you. I also talk about in the book about there's times in Japan where it's time to be a full-fledged foreigner and be like, no, I'm not on the code. Like, nope, I don't have to. So the rules don't apply to me according to what you think, not according to what I think. Again, it's about being able to, you got to be able to play, it's about, like they say, it's about playing chess, not checkers.
On this 21st century Japan, how long did it take for you to do this?
Again, 21st century Japan Decoded is a compilation of maybe really over about 20 years of my receiving emails and texts, not just Black people, but non-Japanese people who live in Japan. Because of my Japanese descent, and I was a writer, they would inbox me questions about their employees or their friends or their spouses or girlfriends or boyfriends and say, why do Japanese do this? Or I feel like I'm being victimized in this, and ask my advice. So after a while, I started noticing I was getting the same emails over and over again. So I took the most popular ones or the frequent complaints or comments and just wrote a book, because it was, so I could just, when people ask me now, I can say, it's right there.
Okay, I tell you. The what do you think, how in relevance to what you're saying and what you know, because you've lived in two different worlds. Well, in fact, you've lived in more than two different worlds, right? You lived in the world of America, then you lived in the world of the Black America. Because my spouse says, I never came to America until I got with you, Joy, because he says, I've lived here for 40 years, but this is not what I'm used to. That Japanese culture is very definitely defined, very definitely observable, very definite in so many ways. And the cry here is, we got to get together. We have to get together. And what I'm looking at is that as a people, we have not taken to like certain principles of orchestrating or architecting, you know, some principles of how to be one, and yet have respect for self-expression.
And I think it's, you know, the thing is, we're talking about accepting ourselves, really, and wanting to fit in to whatever culture that we're in. So the importance of understanding that is, it's love that we all desire. So accepting ourselves, accepting our fears and our pains, accepting our hurts, and admitting to the things that we envy, accepting our anger and sadness and feelings of separation that we sometimes experience. And we go out of our way to get recognition from others, even if it's negative attention, or what do we call it now, of death by suicide. So it's a real thing with human beings that everybody wants to be a part.
Do you have the gender stats on suicide in Japan amongst the young people? Majority male or female?
Men are much higher. I think the men actually have a higher mortality rate due to, again, their situation in society, right? Because they're the ones that have to go out there and work these long hours. And yeah, the pressure is just incredible on them.
Yeah, what you mentioned about these hours, the kids, the children. So you got women who are like single parents, right? They have a husband, but they really don't. It's not really a family unit there. Experiences.
Yes and no, you know, and actually, like, even myself, because I teach cultural lessons and English lessons, and I also do some forms of counseling. But for the younger men that I have private lessons with, the parents, they don't really make it a secret to say that I'm kind of there to supplement some of the, not fathering duties, but I guess you could say not paternal, but like a male, a masculine role model, right? They, like, one boy, he's 7 years old, and I have a lesson with him, and I, before the lesson, I take him out and throw some baseball, throw some wiffle ball, or kick a soccer ball with him, or do something with him in the park just to get him loosened up, you know, or because he's been sitting still in elementary school all day. And, you know, I had to kind of impressed that upon the parents. And as soon as they saw how much the boy liked it, I can see him looking at some of the other boys, because he just moved where I live from Tokyo. So he was the outsider, the way that a lot of foreigners always, or non-Japanese, I don't like the word foreigners, they always perceive themselves to be, and only them. But they don't realize that Japanese do this stuff to themselves as well. But the pressure on the men, and nowadays I think the women has been increasing, because they've been taking on more of a, you know, more roles in the work environment.
Another thing about America that we take for granted, and that is the multi-ethnic and the diversity that exists in this country. And I was trying to figure out, what is this wall? But I visited Korea because I had never experienced a homogeneous people, everybody looking the same, wearing the same clothes, colors, that kind of thing. And I'm listening to you, and I can see how that can come about. And it's a shock. The Koreans came from the Japanese.
No, the opposite.
It's the opposite, the Chinese,
yeah.
then Korean.
No, well, China and Korea, they're much older than Japan. So the Japanese culture, yeah, it flowed from China through Korea, you could say, onto the island. I think that Japan qualifies as a real country. I've heard people a lot more learned than myself call the United States a corporation. Nothing like that would ever occur in Japan, because in Japan, the Japanese citizen is number one. They look out for the needs and the demands of Japanese people, first, foremost, first and last, basically. And then everything is after that.